recording now. What I thought I'd like to cover this week is, first of all, just to encourage everyone at this time, because I know a lot of people are going through a very difficult period. Um, and with the inflation rate running very high in the US, but elsewhere, people are having difficulty keeping up with the cost of living and finding alternative ways to keep overheads down. So today I looked at some Yo- YouTube videos on how to cook for under $1 a meal, and that was very enlightening. Um, yeah, I'm used to living frugally, so it doesn't really bother me very much. But I know that a lot of people have shared with me on my Facebook page that they're finding it very, very difficult during this time. And I know what that's like because, since 2006 I chose to live frugally and to be away from, the normal lifestyle. And so I didn't have a job, and I had to find ways to earn some money. And amazingly, it just seemed that every time that I needed something, the provision was given at the time. And it wasn't given in overabundance, it was just enough to get me through, which I loved about the universe. It arrives on time, but and just enough. I've gotten used to that. But one of the things that helped me over those times when I was facing those things, I used to make up little choruses when I was a younger guy. I used to lead music groups in our churches, and we used to sing choruses. So I started making up little choruses that I would sing during the day just to keep my spirit light. And I made up this little chorus. Remember that God's in you. Remember He's in everyone. So if you are feeling down, don't let it get you down. Just remember that God's in you. And I would sing this little song, and it really did help to lift my spirits. But at the time, I was learning a lot, so you know, I never really felt down and lonely, even though it was difficult because before I awoke, I was very much always had company around, always had a girlfriend, always had friends. In fact, my house was like a barn, a stable that people just kept coming and going all the time, and they knew that they were welcome and could, help themselves to my beer or my food. And sometimes I'd wake up in the morning at 4 or 5 o'clock and go into my lounge, and I'd find 4 or 5 people sleeping there. so, so I was used to having a lot of people around. So making a choice to be on my own was very, very difficult for me in the beginning. So that's why I used to make up these little choruses to remind me that, just to encourage me and to, uh, because I was, as a child, I was always pretty much a loner and away from everyone else. I could spend hours and hours playing on my own, whereas my brothers and sisters always had to have company. So I kind of just returned to that state that I was in when I was a child. Um, and I'll cover that some other time too, how important it is to go back and recover your inner child, and how helpful that is in dealing with situations. But tonight, the second thing I thought I'd cover is my impressions when I first arrived on Sirius B and meeting with the blue avians. Um, and you know, besides the shock, I've seen these 10 to 12 feet tall beings. Um, Once I got used to how uh, kind they were and gentle and respectful and compassionate they were, and they really. And I'm an I person. I found over the years when I was sort of like I was interviewing people for jobs or having deep conversations with people, I would look into their eyes, and the eyes tell you so much about the person. So I would look into their eyes, and what I saw there was just amazing because it was almost like there was just a stream of love coming towards me, and it really I felt encouraged by that. The anatomy of the blue avians is quite strange because they're very tall but very lean and thin. They don't have the same organs that we have because they don't eat and they don't sleep. They have a different physiology to us. Their muscles are not very well developed, and when I asked about that sometime later, I asked my higher self, you know, you seem very thin and lean. They said, well, we don't need to do stuff like you do. We can levitate things, we can lift things in the air with, you know, just through our consciousness. And so they don't have a very strong anatomy per se, but it's made of different materials, so it is intrinsically strong. Their bones don't become brittle, and they live for a very long period of time. They live for 900, you know, plus years if they want to. They have a ritual that they do if, for instance, if they want to go somewhere else into another space-time continuum, they will then consult with the elders there and explain, you know, that they've done all the work that they've done needed to do where they were, and I'll explain that what is the work that they do. They will go through a process that they call Bardoa, where they simply drop their body and move on to another dimension where they will then become the soul of another physical being. So they'll take on the body of that physicality and then of that physical person. But they're very careful because they explained to me later on after that they don't do what is called walk-ins. Now, what happens a lot on our planet, you get you know, spirit beings, soul beings who come and walk into the physiology of a person, and they take over that person's consciousness. And they don't drive the other person out, they simply overwhelm them and put them to sleep. And then they will take over the soul of that person. And if you see a very big change in somebody, all of a sudden it could be because they have a walking. But they don't do that. What they do is they go through the normal incarnational process of whatever that is. So their physiology is very interesting. They don't have blue feathers all over their body, but they do have a blue skin. But it's not the same hue of blue. That sounds poetic, but I don't mean it to be. But they have different blues on their body. Like their feathers are not a constant blue. They might have a few light blue, a few dark blue feathers. And they don't have them all over their bodies. They don't have ears, and they don't have noses like we have. Their mouths are shaped more like a kind of a beak style, but it's not made of hard material like our birds are here. Their skin is very soft there. They don't eat, so they don't need to have teeth. So, and their physical features are not important to them. One thing I had to get used to was they follow very closely the law of one and the law of spirit, and they identify themselves as being spiritual beings, as soul beings. Uh, they don't have names. They don't call themselves by names because they told me that every soul has its own uh, resonance signature. So they recognize people by being with them and picking up the resonance of their soul. And the, they once told me it's like the music of the soul. And so they can recognize the song or the music coming towards them. So they have a very different consciousness to humans. Um, when I asked my higher self, I asked me, what do you actually do here? I mean, no one seems to work or... He says, well, we don't need to work. We don't need to earn a living like humans do. We place an emphasis on being in the spirit of oneness. So they recognize themselves as being part of the whole fabric of the universe, but they do sometimes intervene in souls, in the situations of souls in lower dimensions, because this is going to seem quite strange, but beings in higher dimensions know who their soul family are in other dimensions. So they will check in with those beings in other dimensions from time to time. Well, for them it's like a constant flow of information. They're very intelligent, so they can handle far more information than even our greatest computers on this planet. They're very analytical, they analyze information, they recognize information, but they don't get their information in words. And they explained to me that our language is just the way we create frequencies of sound that are picked up by our ears, and depending on what the person's saying, our brain interprets and then gets meaning out of that. Whereas they don't do that. They just pick up the frequencies of the sound, and they have a way of interpreting not only the information but the emotion. Because to us we think of intelligence being information, but to them it's both intelligence and emotion. So it's electric and magnetic. Electric being information and magnetic being the sound or the emotion. So they're very attuned to pick up nuances in frequencies of sound and light, and electric and magnetic, and information and feelings. And so that they have a totally different understanding of the universe than we have here, for reasons we'll get into some other time. But on Earth we have a lot of false information, and that's one of the things I had to really deal with when I first woke up, because we suffer from something called cognitive dissonance, in that we are able to see, but we don't see what we see. What we see is interpreted by the brain, and the brain tells us what we're seeing. And if we've put stuff into a brain that say a flower, what a flower represents, we'll say that our cognition will say that's a flower, because that's what we've been taught. But if we change that information and say that's not just a flower, that's another soul being, and it's expressing its godness, it's expressing God through its form and expression. And so flowers no longer are just flowers. For instance, for me, when I walk around the garden, I'm consciously aware that I'm in the presence of other soul beings, And so I look at them and I touch them and I smell them. And those sensitivities tell me that, I'm a tree hugger and I talk to the trees. I talk to plants. Not necessarily always through language, but just by touching them and through telepathing to them. And animals are more adept at telepathy than humans are. Like elephants and horses, you can communicate with these animals just through thought. Um, we have an animal whisperer in South Africa, and she will go in amongst and will be with an animal, and the animal will communicate with her what that animal is experiencing and what the problem with that animal is, and then she'll be able to tell the owner, well, this is what this animal is experiencing, and this is what the solution, this is what they want. They don't want to be kept in a paddock. They don't want to be with those other dogs because those other dogs are bullying them. And so, she's in this way, incredible way, able to telepath with animals. And I've tried it often with some success, but not always, communicating with animals just through telepathing with them. And animals look into the eyes. I don't know if you've noticed your dogs or horses or elephants even. When they're with you, they look directly into your eyes. And I did that once with an elephant because when I was younger, I'd taken my kids on an elephant ride at the zoo. And I'd looked at this elephant's eye and I could see that this elephant was looking at me. I was standing next to its trunk and patting it on the trunk. And then many years later, after I had awoken, I went to visit that elephant at the zoo. And I just sat on a bench and I just watched the elephants. And eventually I spotted the one that I'd been on a ride with my kids, and the elephant came and stood at the edge of its moat, because they had a moat around the elephant paddock, and he just looked at me and I looked at him, and we telepathed, and I said, I remember you, and he telepathed back, yes, I remember you too, and he was nodding his head when I was telepathing with him and turning his head up and down. And we had a short conversation, and then he trumpeted. He lifted his trunk and gave off an elephant trumpet. And he was telling me that he was very happy that I could communicate with him. And then he turned around and swaggered off with his tail wagging. And so I left after that. But that was a very interesting encounter for me to realize that elephants and animals are very, very intelligent. But it's just that we approach them and expect them to have the same consciousness that we have. But they don't. And that was what I encountered on Sirius B, that these beings understood my consciousness, but I didn't understand theirs. So I was trying to understand what their consciousness was. So they began to teach me what their outlook on life was. And it's very different from humans in that they don't see material manifestations as reality, because they showed me that they are able to change their hologram. They're able to shapeshift. They're able to change the color of the sky, for instance, if they all agree. They don't. One of the things they told me when I first got there is I should stay as neutral as I could. Excuse me. Because my thoughts and emotions would affect their hologram. So they are in a community by agreement, and they all agree that is the experience that they want to have, and so they collectively agree and create those experiences for themselves, which I think there's something to learn here for us as humans, that if we could get together with like-minded people and get them to agree collectively and make this agreement, this is our solemn agreement, that this is the kind of experiences we want, and these are the kind of experience we're going to create for ourselves. It is possible to do that. But in doing that, one has to know, for instance, how to affect your hologram. And I've got a course called Mastering the Hologram, which some of you have done. And it's really about mastering your thoughts and emotions, and allowing your thoughts and emotions to have the highest standards and values, because those higher standards and values will change the frequency of your thoughts and will change the frequency of your emotions. It's just, we like batteries, really, in a sense that if that battery runs out of energy, it has to be, the energy has to be recharged in the battery. So we go and recharge our batteries by eating food. But in reality, we could actually recharge our batteries just by gazing at the sun early in the morning and gazing at the sun late at night. I did that and started to do that, and I was able to not eat for 3 weeks. I only started eating because my girlfriend at the time that was living with me, her kids thought I was trying to kill myself. So they came around and they begged me, please start eating. So I agreed to start eating, but in several occasions I've actually stopped eating for as long as 3 weeks without feeling hungry. In fact, I don't feel hungry very often. And when I feel hungry, then that's a sign to me that I should eat something. But I don't just eat for the sake of eating. I only eat when I feel hungry, which is unlike most people, and that's why I live on my own. Because if I lived in a household of people who are normal, they would, be eating breakfast, lunch, and supper, for instance, whereas I would only eat when I was hungry. So, but there are other ways you can charge that battery, like I said earlier on, Dan, you weren't here. I used to sing choruses to myself, God is in everyone, He's even in the sun. So if you are feeling lonely, here's what you can do. God is inside you. And I used to sing these little things that used to lift my spirits, and I could feel my frequencies rising. I could feel my emotions changing. I could feel I became more optimistic and more confident about things, and just little things like I've been through that journey with you where I use your breath. And breathing is a wonderful way to recharge your energy, because unlike the medical profession here that tells you you're breathing in oxygen and through the air, you're not breathing in oxygen, you're breathing in ether. Ether is energy. It's like water. It's the fifth state of water. So when you breathe in, that ether is electric, and you blow it into your energy fields, into your soul body. And so you supplement the energy in your body. And these beings that I was with, they do that a lot. They sing a lot. They even dance. They love dancing. They love expressing joy. They told me that if you laugh and you're joyful, you replenish the energy in your soul. You give back to your soul. So you are expressing energy that you want to experience in your soul, so you begin to experience it in your everyday life. You're giving each other experiences. So they have a couple of rituals that they do as well, and I was invited to one. It was called the. They had a different name for it, but essentially what it was a procreation ritual, and what they do it is really to how they procreate, and they do it through energy. They create a formation. It's very carefully planned out, um, where they have groups of three standing together with other groups of three, and they have a kind of a formation which is called a ruche, and the ritual is called a surya. Um, and then they begin to dance around in circles, and the women dance in a anti-clockwise direction, the men dance in a clockwise direction. And so by dancing, the feminine dancing in an anti-clockwise direction, they're creating more magnetic energy, and the men dancing in the clockwise direction create electric energy. And it's pretty much how hurricanes and cyclones work. You know, they just create spiraling, right? It's like a dance of energy, and that creates a spiral. It's called a standing scalar wave. And that's how they create things, by using their energy bodies to manifest in their reality field, in their hologram. Um, and in this ritual, they had drums and cymbals as well that making noise, and they sounded like bells, but I didn't see anybody with bells. I don't know where the bell sounds came from, but so I think some of them might have had these bells on their arms or their legs as they danced around those little bells. It was very pleasant sound, and it's very harmonious sound, and they do that for quite a long time. When I say for a long time, they do it for about 6 minutes, and then the drum beats start getting faster, and they start dancing faster. And when it gets to a certain critical mass of energy, the couple, the music suddenly stops, and everybody stops together. Boom, and it's quiet, and then the couple just walk into each other. They literally walk from one to the other, because they're etheric beings. They're not physical matter beings as we are. They're in a higher density, so their bodies are not as dense as we are. So they're able to walk through doors and walk through walls and walk through trees, but they don't do that because they consider that an infringement on the rights of those of other beings. So they only do it by agreement. And before this, and they're not male and female, they're androgynous. But one of them chooses that they're going to represent the female energy, and the other one's going to represent the male energy. And they've been to the Syrian elders, and it's all by agreement. The whole community agrees to this, and they all participate in it. And it's massive. There must have been hundreds of people dancing and singing, and it looked like, it's very difficult to describe, like a moving shield, a shield spinning, but spinning in opposite directions. You had some spinning this way and some parts of the shield spinning the other way. And then when the music stops, they walk into each other, and there's the kind of flash of light that comes out of them. It's white light, and then all the other colors start appearing. And when that happens, everyone falls down, because it's like, for me, I experienced it like an orgasm, but even more than I could imagine an orgasm might be. I literally fell onto the ground. It was just so overwhelming. And I just lay there with my eyes closed, not knowing what the heck was going on, because had been filled with this, so much energy that I was overwhelmed by it, and it kind of sort of paralyzed me for a few seconds. And when everyone recovered, everyone just went their way, but with very happy, smiley faces and happy sounds, and they danced and made, they don't call it singing. For them, it's more like generating frequencies when they speak, when they make sounds, because if I don't know if you know about cymatics, where you create a frequency of sound and it creates a certain geometric form on the paper. If you play sound through a paper or something and you change the frequency, it changes the shape of that frequency. So sound creates form. So when they want to manifest it, they do it through sound. And they will make these sounds that manifest what they want to manifest. It's really just creating form through sound. I know it sounds very strange, and it was very strange to me at the time as well, but once I understood cymatics and how standing scalar waves, because even in cymatics it's just a two-dimensional representation of the form, whereas they can create forms in 3 dimensions. So they create standing forms, for instance, and that's how they understand us. They just see us as standing forms of the frequencies in our soul bodies. So often my higher self would stand with me, and he would tell me what I'm thinking. He would telepath me, are you worried about this? Don't be frightened. Don't be concerned. Stay neutral. Just observe. Don't emote or anything. And he was picking up my vibrations all the time, which was disconcerting at the beginning, but then it became quite comforting to me to know that he knew exactly how I was feeling and didn't need an explanation of that. He would just allow me to feel what I was feeling or think what I was thinking, and he would pick up on what I was thinking. And that's how I started communicating with him. And from early April 2006, after that I had regular communication with him, when I sometimes, it was daily, but sometimes many times during the day, I would feel this presence in around me, and then I would just listen to what he was telling me, and he would speak to me, telepath with me, and I'd get these thoughts in my head, but he didn't always give long explanations. He would just say, walkway. And then I'd look around and I'd see a walkway, and I'd look up at the walkway, and there I'd see somebody that I knew, that I'd been thinking about. And he used to give me these little clues as to where to look, and what might happen around the corner, for instance, or because I was having all these synchronous things happen to me that I wasn't used to, because I'd think of somebody and then they'd phone me, or I'd think of somebody and they'd come to my office and speak to me. People I hadn't seen for years, in fact, sometimes. And so I had to get used to this energetic way of living, and understanding how everything in the universe is energy, and that what we experience here as our reality is just a hologram that we are projecting through our emotions and our thoughts. But what's happened to humans, their thoughts and emotions have been placed there. They've been indoctrinated into us, and we are told what this experience is supposed to be. And so we believe it, and then we start projecting it. And that's how we create this reality that we are living in. And it's important for us to begin to understand that we can change that simply through our thoughts and emotions. As Jesus said, not by might nor by power, but by my Holy Spirit. And what is the Holy Spirit? Is that combination of sound and light waves, the energy that we can use to change our reality. And of course, our standards and values on this planet are quite appalling to the Syrians, the blue avians. They, they find human standards and values to be very, very low. And so they're very wary of humans and human thinking, human behavior, because it's inconceivable to them that we go and kill each other. We declare war and we go fight with each other and we kill each other, we drop bombs on each other. To them it's almost inconceivable that we could be so cruel to each other. They said they could understand it if we were being invaded by, some beings from outer space that we needed to protect ourselves. But we are killing our own species. And that is the human species, the Homo sapiens. They find that difficult to understand because they don't do that. But they do understand why we do it, because they are well aware of the history of the planet, our planet, and of the invasion by the fallen angelics. So another thing that they taught me a lot of things about how to raise one's frequencies and how to lower one's frequencies. And to them, we say raising frequencies and lowering frequencies, but really it's just about thinking with and feeling with a higher standard and value. And if we accept war, for instance, as a way of life and way of living, that is low frequency thinking and emotions, and that creates more low frequency, because then people feel angry, they feel threatened, and they feel afraid, and it creates chaos on this planet. And that's how humans have been managed here by the fallen ones, by the controllers of this planet. They just want to keep us in fear and keep us feeling incapable. They want us to feel guilty. They want us to feel fearful. And so they've inculcated all these doctrines and dogma that help to do that. So we do their job for them by believing what they've told us. My higher self once said to me, the only thing that humans are guilty of is believing all the lies. And if you think about it, that is the only thing that humans are guilty of, is believing all the lies. There's nothing else to feel guilty of or guilty about. The lie that it's okay to kill another a soul being. It's okay to kill the animals. It's okay to kill the birds and the fish and kill each other. I mean, there are other ways we could nourish ourselves without killing all these beings. But they're here to. I also found out that by telepathing with animals, that they understand that they are here to serve us, and they are serving us with a hope that we will begin to understand, because they understand a lot better. They haven't been corrupted like humans have been corrupted. They still have pure souls, and they still have their sovereignty. They retain their sovereignty. But humans have tried to take their sovereignty away and tried to, bully them into submission sometimes, by corralling them and hurting them and pushing them over the cliff to kill them. And, humans do some crazy stuff. I'm talking, if you look at it through the eyes of the blue avians, they find humans very unstable, because people emotions change, and they're up and down on a daily basis. They don't show much consistency in terms of being able to be stable and and to be loving and kind all the time. Um, and that's the standard that they live by. Is to them it's just not acceptable to even think of hurting, harming another person, of impeding their freedoms. They also have a strong belief in sovereignty, that everyone has sovereign rights over their own consciousness and their own conscious being, and so they respect everyone else's sovereignty. Because they told me, if you don't allow everyone else to be sovereign, then you can't be sovereign yourself. Sovereignty depends on allowing others to be sovereign also. So humans are so busy interfering with other people's stuff that and judging them and wanting to tell them how to live their lives, and to them that's anathema. They don't live like that. They allow other beings to do whatever they wish, and they like one of the reasons they haven't come to this planet is because they respect our sovereign right to live the way we want to, and we seem to want to live the way of the fallen ones and the fallen angelic, so they respect that. Because if they interfered, they would they would not only interfere with our sovereignty, they would destroy their own sovereignty by interfering with our sovereignty, because that's how sovereignty works, is you have to allow everyone else to have their own feelings. And if one can adopt that notion, I found it very easy to develop an attitude of being unoffended. Humans quite easily are offended here, but I started to practice an attitude of not being offended, and sometimes people would deliberately try to offend me and provoke me. And once I started practicing sovereignty, I thought, that's okay. You're entitled to think what you want, you're entitled to say what you want, you're entitled to do whatever you want, but allow me to do that as well. Because I'm a sovereign being, I recognize your sovereignty, so you go be sovereign where you want to be, and I'll be sovereign where I want to be. And it's a totally different way of life to what humans normally experience, because we want to tell our children what to do, we want to tell other people what to do. We're so used to other people telling us what to do that we tell other people what to do, and so nobody recognizes the sovereignty of anybody else. And that's a very difficult thing for the blue avians to understand, that we can't accept the sovereignty of other beings. We can't accept that, animals are who they are, and they are there for a purpose. They're there to express the very nature of God. And we are here to express the very nature of God. And they consider themselves to be one with the universe, and there is just one thing, and it's called God. And it's everywhere, in everyone, and every expression of energy is God. So they have a totally different, unique perspective on how other people live. They do, for instance, they had experienced wars. Now, I think I told you that there were two different species on this community on Sirius B, that they call themselves the Azurites. There were the blue-feathered ones, and then there were the tall gold and silver ones. And the gold and silver ones had come to this community asking for refuge because their particular planet in the Orion belt had been attacked, and they needed shelter, and they had similar views to the blue avians, so the blue avians allowed them to stay. But they don't allow anybody to stay. In fact, I found it was quite a privilege that they had allowed me to come there. But they knew that I was Aismir before I incarnated on Earth. And so you say, how could you be in two places at the same time? Well, it has to do with time and space and how time and space work. And that they can move through time and space, unlike us. We only recognize linear time. And we're going to, at the moment, on Earth, what is happening, there is a time blending exercise going on that I said I would speak about in the next meeting, but I've decided not to speak about that right now, because it's very, very advanced physics, and one has to go into the understanding of what is time and space. And I did post a course that I did called Time, Space and Timelines, and it's, if you don't have an understanding of the basic, you'll never understand what's going on. But essentially it's how the universe is created. Okay, I'll give you a quick glimpse into it. Its source light comes down. I'll give you the simple version. Source lights come down and it hits a mirror, and the mirror downsteps the frequency of the light coming down, and that gets bounced off at a 45-degree angle onto another mirror, and then that light is bounced off into the fourth mirror. That light coming down is called the primal light and sound fields, that goes down into the parallel light and sound fields, that bounces off into the parallel reality fields, and then bounces down into a dimensional reality field or hologram, and that's the experience we have. So what is time? Time is basically a sequence of information held within a beam of light. It's like a fiber optic cable. That beam of light coming down, it progresses through a certain time span, and then it's converted into information. So it's just information carried by a beam of light. So what they are able to do in 2014, they took back control of the parallel light and sound fields. Okay, that's our parallel reality, our parallel hologram. And by taking control of the parallel light and sound fields, they were able to reprogram the information that was held there. And what they did is they read, it's like a scanner, they scanned our consciousness, our soul bodies, and the information that belonged there, they programmed into the parallel reality fields. And the information that didn't belong there, in other words, it wasn't Christic information, the Christ being the 15th, 13, 14, dimensions 13, 14, and 15, the God fields, and all the information in the universe is carried through sound waves through the sound fields, and it goes to the Hall of Records, or there's another name for it, I've just escaped me, but it's held in the Hall of Records. So they took that information from the Hall of Records and then started reprogramming the parallel light and sound fields, because the information in the Hall of Records is the same information that exists in our soul bodies, because our souls have memory. And so they are reprogrammed since 2014. They've been programming the parallel light and sound fields, and they're slowly starting to blend that information with our holographic light and sound fields here in in our reality field. And that's how that Mandela effect occurred, that people had different memories of the same event. And because they are, and when that happened, when this Mandela effect had happened, they realized that they jumped the gun too quickly and released the information into the consciousness of certain people on this planet that had changed their memories of events. So they are continuing with that exercise of reprogramming the parallel light and sound fields. But to understand that it's not just in our lifetime, it's since 246,000 years ago, everything that has happened on the planet, they've had to reprogram into the parallel light and sound fields. So there's a lot of information that's going in there that will change. When we ascend, all of that information will be downloaded into our memories, into this little battery we call a soul. And so we will begin to remember that information. It'll be available to us. But until that happens, we're going to start getting slow leaks of information to prepare us for that download, which will happen when the solar flash goes off. Because the solar flash, remember, is just light. And light is information. So all this information is going to come down, boom, and change our consciousness, change our memory of the past. So all that bad memory, all those miasms that are held in our soul body are going to disappear. They'll be cleansed and they'll be gone immediately. But that gets quite heavily into the mechanics of ascension, and I've got a course called The Mechanics of Ascension, so if you go have a look at that, it'll explain how that happened. So yeah, next week what I'll do is people often have asked me over the years, how is it that I could get from here to there on Sirius B? And I have difficulty trying to get people to understand this, but I didn't go anywhere. My consciousness traveled. My soul body traveled. And wherever your soul body goes, it takes, your soul body holds the blueprint and the template of your physical body. So wherever your soul body goes, you'll take your physical body with you. And it's just my consciousness that was able to go deeply to think and feel the vibrations of Sirius B. I didn't really go anywhere. In fact, nobody goes anywhere. Time and space is an illusion. So is movement. Movement is just the way sound creates, form, and it moves. And we think things move. It's just a different kind of understanding of how holograms and consciousness work. Yeah, so next week I'll go deeper into explaining that process of raising my frequencies to be able to raise my consciousness to a level that would gain me access into a higher dimension. Because it wasn't something like a practice of being good and loving and kind. It wasn't just about that, but it was really getting involved with the energetics that we hold in our soul body and raising that energy. And once you raise that energy in your soul body, it becomes unconscionable to be angry or fearful or nasty to people. It just happens automatically. It's just unimaginable. If we held the imagination, the image of things in our heads, then that's what we're going to produce. But if it becomes unimaginable, then we remove those images that we have of how things are supposed to do, and we replace them with new images in our heads. And so that's the changing of the consciousness of the people to get to have a different understanding how we can create form a different world through light and sound. And it's as simple as that, but it's not that simple because we have different terms for it. We don't understand light and sound as being magnetic, electric, information and emotion. So, you know, so when someone's talking about emotion, I would recognize that immediately what they're talking about is magnetic energy. But, you know, one had to get used to jumping between the understanding of light being information, light is information, is electric and information, sound is magnetic and emotion. And emotion exists everywhere in the universe. It's just a magnetic field that it attracts. And that's in a sense, what we are. We are attracting beings. This little magnet within us pulls in information, and that's how we create in our consciousness the experiences that we think we're having, but we're not really having. It's just all an illusion, a trick. I hope I haven't blown your minds with that, but for what it's worth, I think, you know, gaining an understanding of how it works is very, very difficult. And I appreciate that because for me, it was mind-blowing. But it was so mind-blowing that it changed my life forever. You know, before I woke up, I was a naughty little bastard, drinking and taking drugs and, you know, womanizing, and, you know, my girlfriend used to call me her lovable rogue. Because I didn't care a shit about anybody else's feelings, and, you know, I was just having fun, and if it was fun, I would do it, you know. So to change from that to the person I've become now it had to take a massive change of consciousness for me to be able to achieve that. And so I went on that path, and it has changed me, like in wonderful ways, but also in ways I could never have imagined, actually. So I'm going to end now, and thanks all of you for joining this meeting, and we'll do this again next week if our electrical supply will allow it. If we have power at the time, but I'll try to make a plan with the battery or something so I can run my laptop. But the problem is the internet. Running that is a problem when there's no electricity, because the internet service provider doesn't have electricity, so their electricity is unstable. So I have a very unstable signal when there's no power. Anyway, see you next week, and much love and respect to you all, and have a good day, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Bye-bye.